The protagonist, Charlie, is a 32-year-old man with intellectual disabilities. He works as a janitor in a bakery. Most of the time, he doesn't understand what people around him are laughing at. But he believes very simply that as long as he laughs along with everyone else, they all like him. Because of that, his co-workers constantly tease him and make fun of him. Yet Charlie still sees them as his friends and tries desperately to please them. More than anything, Charlie wants to be able to do the things other people can do, like baking bread. But no matter how hard he tries, he just can't handle the job. He wants to become smarter to understand the world the way others do. While reading this part, I was reminded of a classmate I had in elementary school. I can't even remember his name clearly anymore. A few years ago I still could, but now it's gone. He also had some intellectual difficulties, though not severe ones. Even simple math problems were hard for him. Most classmates mocked him, and the teachers, in their own way, encouraged that mockery by tolerating it. He was very tall, and his father believed there was no point in him continuing school, better to help out with farm work instead. So he dropped out. That summer after school, my classmates and I were playing by the river. He happened to be working in the fields nearby. He ran over, recognized me, and started rummaging through our school bags, flipping through our books. Everyone called him stupid, and he just smiled. I think at the very least he knew he wanted to play with kids his own age. I don't know whether he understood what school really meant, but I know this, he probably didn't enjoy working in the fields with his father. As a child, I didn't understand how tragic that scene was, especially when I think about how everyone laughed at him as he went through our bags. Looking back now, the loneliness of it is overwhelming. I hope he is doing okay now. Back to the novel. Charlie gives me that same feeling later. He participates in a scientific experiment designed to enhance intelligence. The experiment has already succeeded on a laboratory mouse named Algernon, which is where the novel gets its title. After surgery, Algernon's intelligence increases dramatically. He can solve complex maze problems and quickly find the exit. The scientists invite Charlie to become the first human test subject, claiming the operation might make him smarter. Charlie wants it more than anything. To be like ordinary people, to bake bread, to understand what everyone else is doing. So he agrees. In the lab, he meets Algernon. In reality, Charlie doesn't even have the capacity to sign the consent forms himself. His parents do it for him. As fellow experimental subjects, Charlie and Algernon become bound by fate. In fact, every one of us, during our student years, has some connection to Algernon's fate, because education itself is fundamentally about developing intelligence. When I was young, we lived in an era of knowledge worship. Students were rigidly divided into smart and stupid. The stupid students had no dignity. The smart ones were treated as superior beings. Anyone born in the 70s or 80s probably remembers that sharp hierarchy in schools. Today, teachers and parents may no longer equate grades so directly with intelligence. There is more emphasis on emotional well-being, individuality, and happiness. People are no longer seen purely as machines for absorbing knowledge. But when I was growing up, the slogan "knowledge changes fate" was everywhere. It was deeply embedded in our parents' minds and ours. Schools were strictly stratified by grades, so much so that even our early ideas of love were shaped by it. If a kid said, "I like that girl," the first qualification was often, "She has good grades." That standard even became part of our aesthetic culture. The novel is structured as a series of progress reports written by Charlie. At the beginning, these reports are full of spelling mistakes. Even in translation, those errors are preserved, so they don't interfere with the reading experience. As Charlie's intelligence grows, the spelling errors gradually disappear. His comprehension improves. His sentences become longer and more complex. That's when Charlie begins to realize that he once had no dignity at the bakery, that he was just there for others' amusement. As his intelligence rises, so do his shame and inferiority. In a very short time, Charlie becomes smarter than ordinary people, even smarter than his former co-workers. He devours books, absorbs knowledge at a frightening speed, and easily understands complex texts and advanced mathematics. You can think of Charlie's experiment as a condensed version of our own educational journey, 10 years, or even longer, compressed into a short span. The process of acquiring knowledge and developing intelligence isn't fundamentally different. Charlie's story just exaggerates and concentrates it. From misspelled sentences to complex expressions, from ignorance to self-awareness, the trajectory is the same. The scientists see Charlie as progress, as their achievement. In much the same way, parents and teachers often see students' success as their own accomplishment. Charlie himself is reduced to a tool for acquiring knowledge, no different from Algernon. The only difference is that Algernon cannot escape the cage. Perhaps Charlie can either. The more Charlie understands, the lonelier he becomes. That's when the tragedy truly begins. He starts to grasp the complexity of human emotions, the facades, the cruelty he once could perceive. The people in the bakery were never his friends. He was simply an object of ridicule. The scientists treat him as an experimental product, not a human being with dignity. Charlie falls in love with his former teacher, the woman who trained him. Despite his extraordinary intelligence and vast knowledge, he cannot navigate even the simplest emotional relationships. Emotionally, he remains stuck at the level of a young child. At the same time, the gap in intelligence completely cuts him off from his original world. He becomes isolated and arrogant, even hurting the woman he loves. Tormented by desire, identity, and emotional confusion, Charlie begins searching for the source of his fear and emotional immaturity. He turns to his past, his family. He seeks out the father, mother, and sister he has seen in over a decade. This journey marks the beginning of the destruction of his inner world. He remembers a mother who rejected him because of his disability, a sister who was ashamed of him. Only his father was willing to accept him. The novel raises a brutal question. If I am not smart, if I am slow and my parents gain no pride or praise from me, do I still deserve unconditional love? Charlie as mother could accept him. Her love required validation eventually. After violent arguments, Charlie was sent to an institution. From that moment on, his emotional development stopped. Abandoned by his family, rejected by his mother, despised by his sister, everything froze there. Now, with his restored awareness, those childhood wounds are torn open again. He finally understands why his emotional development never progressed. We spend our entire student lives developing intelligence, but emotional capacity is often neglected because no one knows how to teach it. Emotional understanding is learned through experience, just like knowledge. Without guidance or example, emotional intelligence remains underdeveloped. This is why children whose parents can express love often struggle to do so themselves unless they later learn it elsewhere. Charlie embodies this tragedy. His intelligence makes him arrogant. One day, without realizing it, he mocks someone weaker than himself, just as others once mocked him. But emotionally, he remains clumsy and childlike, unable to understand human relationships. In the end, he becomes volatile and deeply lonely. Like Algernon, he tries to escape the cage. But where can he go? Algernon, once placed with another mouse, harmed it. Charlie helps Algernon escape only to put him in another cage. As long as you are human, you cannot escape the cage of human emotion. True solitude is impossible. For Algernon, the only exit from the maze is death. After suffering rapid intellectual decline, Algernon dies quietly one night. Charlie realizes the same fate awaits him. He buries Algernon and holds a funeral. Then he dedicates his remaining time to studying himself. He discovers the fatal flaw in the experiment. When humans become machines for extracting knowledge, the brain cannot bear the endless load. Collapse is inevitable. In his final reports, the spelling mistakes slowly return. His language deteriorates. He becomes who he once was, and once again he loses awareness of himself. He hopes to be like everyone else, to bake bread, to understand the world. He is mocked again without knowing why, and he laughs along. I don't know which is worse, ignorant happiness or lucid pain. Although the author tries to give the ending a touch of human warmth, perhaps a bit forced, the overwhelming sorrow remains. I strongly recommend this book to students. Written in the 1960s, it has never become outdated. Great science fiction never does because it explores fundamental human questions. In some sense, 从 elementary school 到 university, 我们都是 Algernon, 只是用了更完善的智力开发方法。Every day we solve mazes. If we choose the right path, we get rewarded. But human survival has two dimensions, one outward mastering nature, science, and one inward understanding ourselves and our relationship. Most people must return to human connection and self-identity.